This block is called Irish Chain-esque. It's like an Irish chain. It finishes at 12 inches. And this was a picture in the Facebook group, the Quilt Makers Workshop, and the person who did it, her name is Carrie, and she posted a picture of this, and I thought it was such a neat block. Here is the diagram, and here is the picture of the quilt, the layout of the quilt. This one has 4 blocks across and 5 blocks down, and it also has cornerstones and sashing between the blocks, and the sashing and the cornerstones go on the outside of the quilt as well. She used the same fabric in the chains going on the diagonal, the small chains going on the diagonal, and then a variety of fabrics on the other side. Here is the cutting instructions. There are 2 different sizes of squares. This is a 3-inch finished square, which is cut 3.5 inches. You'll need 4 of the dark fabric and 8 of the background. If you have a 6-inch cube, it's shape 1. Patch B is the smaller square. It's 1.5 inch finished, and you cut this 2 inches by 2 inches. There's 8 patches for the background and 8 patches for the dark fabric. And it's the 6-inch cube shape 2 if you're doing AccuQuilt. There is a strip piecing alternative, and you can, instead of cutting individual squares, especially if you're going to do a lot of blocks, that's a lot of squares to cut. You make this strip set, then cut it into 2-inch segments. Then you can make 4 of the 4 patch units with the B patch. For the A patch, you'll cut the strips 3.5 inches by 16 inches and then subcut those into 4 3.5 inch segments. If you're going to do multiple blocks, you'll probably want to do strip piecing. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to use the quilting apps to figure out how much fabric and how many strips you need for the strip piecing, and also to figure out how much fabric you need for the cornerstones and the sashing. Here are the fabrics I've chosen. These are the small squares. These will go through the diagonal of the quilt. And these are the large squares that go through the other diagonals. Now I'll piece the 4 patches and we'll come back and put the block together. Here are the large 4 patches and the small 4 patches. We'll just put them together in the block. Now stay tuned and I'll show you how to calculate your fabric for sashing and cornerstones and for chain piecing. The first thing we're going to do is calculate how many strips you need to strip piece this small 4-patch chain on the diagonal here, the blue and white. Let me see if I can make it bigger. So here is the chain. This quilt, for our example, we have 20 blocks. There are 4 blocks across and 5 blocks down. And there are 8 patches in this diagonal in one block. There's 2 here. We're looking at the blue patches now, the dark patches. 2, 4, 6, 8. We have 8 patches per block and 20 blocks. That means we have a total of 160 patches of this blue fabric in the entire quilt. These patches were cut 2 inches by 2 inches, and so 20 blocks times 8 patches is 160 patches. So we put that in here and we see that our results, you cut 8 strips at 2 inches times the width of fabric. Next it says to subcut each strip, but we're not going to do that now. We're going to cut 8 strips of the blue and 8 strips of the background fabric and sew those 8 strips, sew 2 together, a dark and a light and dark and a light. So you'll have 8 strip sets. Once you sew those together and press them, then you cut your 21 segments out of each strip set and you cut them at 2 inches. then you'll have a total of 160 pieces, and you'll sew 2 together to make your 4 patch. So for the dark fabric, you'll need 16 inches, or roughly half a yard, and the same amount of fabric for the light fabric or the background fabric. Now let's see if we can calculate for these larger patches. These larger patches were cut at 3.5 inches, and we have 2, 4. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 in each block. So 4 patches per 20 block is 80 patches. Let's put our 80 in here now. And let's change this to 3.5 because these were cut at 3.5 inches. And then here are our results. So for the large patches, the large 4 patch, you'll cut 7 strips at 3.5 inches times the width of fabric. You'll cut 7 of the dark fabrics and 7 of the background fabrics. Then once you sew those together in a set of 2, a light and a dark, press your seam, and then you subcut your segments and use those segments to make your 4 patches. So those go a lot faster. So it's this, you calculate it the same way as if you were cutting squares, but you don't do the subcutting until you sew the strip set together. The next thing we're going to figure out is how much fabric you need for the cornerstones and the sashing. I've got a diagram here, a picture here of the quilt without the blocks. It's easier to see the sashing and the cornerstones. Now this is our quilt that's 4 by 5. It's got 20 blocks in it. The first thing we need to do is count how many cornerstones there are and how many sashings. So let's go with the cornerstones, and these are the squares here. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. So we have 30 cornerstones. And the cornerstones are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches cut. We write that down. Now let's count the sashing. We have horizontal sashings, and then we have vertical sashings. So the horizontal sashings, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is 24. So we'll write 24 down. And then the vertical sashing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. So that's 25. We add the vertical and horizontal sashings. 24 plus 25 is 49. These blocks, before they're sewn together, are 12.5 inches square. That means that this sashing has to be 12.5 inches, the lengthwise grain, and they're 2.5 inches wide. That's the crosswise grain. So 12.5 for the lengthwise and 2.5 for the crosswise. Now let's put these into our little calculator and see how much we need. For the cornerstones, which are 2.5 by 2.5, you can always, if you want to do scrappy, you can find those out of your scrap bin if you have a scrap bin of 2.5 inch squares. Otherwise, let's put 2.5 in here in the lengthwise, 2.5 in the crosswise, and we needed 30 of those. So if you were cutting all of the cornerstones the same cut fabric, you'll cut 2 strips at 2.5 inches times the width of fabric, and subcut each strip into 16 segments of 2.5 inches for a total of 30 pieces. The fabric you need is 5 inches, or approximately 0.14 yards, which is probably around a quarter of a yard. You can round that up. Now let's figure out the sashing, how much we need for the sashing. So the lengthwise grain is the 12.5 inches, and the crosswise grain is 2.5 inches, and we needed 49 of these. And here our results are: you cut 4 strips at 12.5 inches times width of fabric, and subcut each strip into 16 segments of 2.5 inches for a total of 49 pieces. We need 50 inches of fabric, or approximately 1.39 yards. So I'd round that up to 1.5 yards. So that's your lesson for today.
Thank you for watching.